Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Your Spa Life show. Spa life is a lifestyle that accepts that accomplishment and harmony coexist. The Spa and Spa Life, the SPA, is for Seek Power Always, that power within you to do your deeper work in the world. I am so honored to have our next guest here on the show, who is Marjorie Morrison. She is the CEO and co-founder of Psych Hub, the world's most comprehensive multimedia platform for mental health education. Psych Hub connects people with trauma-informed, clinically sound, and culturally aware content delivered in different ways to meet learners where they're at. Along with co-founder Patrick J. Kennedy, their mission is to move behavioral health providers from generalists to specialists through upskilling and certifying them in evidence-based practices, allowing for more intelligent matching for those seeking care. Prior, Morrison was founder and CEO of Psych Armor, a 501c3 hosting free online courses for the military veteran space. Morrison is a licensed psychotherapist, author, and has received numerous awards. Marjorie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Diane. I'm honored to be here.
Well, I am really excited about this conversation. It's so timely and relevant right now. And one of the things I noticed, first off on your website, is that you talked about that we are in the midst of a mental health crisis and to be educated in how we navigate these issues. And I mean, I don't know about you, but the last 2 years have been the most altering for pretty much everyone on the planet. And people are struggling with mental health issues now more than ever. What advice do you have for people?
Yeah, I mean, it really is a crazy, crazy time in mental health. And I'd say that, I mean, you know what, it always was. So it's just that now it's in the forefront because COVID just kicked kind of everything in overdrive. And, you know, my advice for people is to get educated and to learn, because there's a lot of these mental health issues are preventable or a lot easier treatable, just like anything in physical health, if we catch it earlier. But when we wait until things get really bad, they're really hard to treat. So it's just as important to get educated about mental health as your own physical health. You know, what signs you look for when there might be something wrong. It's important we call it mental health literacy, but learn about different types of symptoms so that you know what they are and that you can put practice in place to kind of start to make them better before they get bad. And say that's like the main thing. And then also being educated about the types of treatment. People don't realize when they want to go to a licensed professional, there's many different types. There's everything from psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, counselors, peers, coaches, and there's different people for different needs, and not everybody needs to see a psychiatrist. So it's just learning about what you need at that stage of your life. And then also finding providers that do use evidence-based practice. There are these, we call them that because they've actually been proven with evidence to be more effective at treating symptoms than just anything. So it's just so critical that we get that when you do finally decide that you want to get help, that you get matched to the right help.
Right. What are you finding for children in particularly right now? You know, it just seems that there's so much confusion for them. And I'm wondering in terms of how the mental health is affecting them. I mean, there's, in-person learning, remote learning, masking, not masking. I mean, even my grandchildren are, talking about, all the experimental protocols are going on and what do we know about them? And their friends are talking about it. And there's a lot of stress that is happening for children and the mental aspect of it. What are you finding on this, as time is starting to come, through on some of this? What are some of the impacts that this is happening on mental health for children?
Yeah, that's a great question, Diane. You know what? The kids and our teens are suffering now more than ever. And there's a lot of contributing factors to it. Like I said earlier, COVID kicked things into overdrive. For one, you could just imagine that we're social creatures, and kids, we learn so much about ourselves through our social interactions. So when you take all of that away, you become very isolated. And then you add on social media and a lot of times gaming, online gaming. So you become more and more isolated, or you look at, what I would say people's best self is on social media. I mean, people don't typically put their, struggling self on there. And so you get a skewed version of the world, if you will. So if you're feeling, down and, feeling left out and lonely, I mean, loneliness is so profound during COVID, especially. And then you look at social media and you see other people. It's very real. And it's not one thing that brought us to this place, but our teens and our adolescents are having a really horrible time. And substance use is at an all-time high, overdose are high. People are very vulnerable right now. So, again, I think the key is we all need to be educated. We need to know what to look for in our own kids and in our friends and families. And they also need to be educated to be able to support their friends and to know what to look for in themselves. It's like anything, the more knowledge is power, right? The more we know, the more we're able to handle these things. And that's the bad and the difficult. The good of things right now is that there is a very a beautiful culture right now where stigma is starting to be broken. I mean, I've been in this space for decades, and it used to be nobody talked about mental health, and now everybody is. And there's something really, really great about that, because this is really a watershed moment in mental health for those of us that have been in this space, to see an emphasis on it, see people talking about it, seeing changes about it. And so there is some really good that's coming of it. And I think a lot of us are counting on that generation to break glass and to continue to advocate for better benefits, better care, more proactive care, and all of those things. So, I think it's a tough time for teens and youth, but there's also, with that comes a lot of good opportunities.
Right. And what's some advice that you can give some of, our parent and grandparent listeners out there who are maybe navigating, is this normal teenage behavior? Is this a reflection of what's happening in the environment? At what point do they, need to be concerned? I mean, I know that we're always concerned and probably overly on some and not enough on others. How do you navigate that?
So I will take it from the Psych Hub lens, is that we have our mental health ally hub. And what we do is we create multimedia education on these topics for different learners. So everyone learns differently. Some people, like what you're doing, like to listen. We do podcasts, we do short videos. We build very, very, very engaging courses that are, very heavily produced and clinically sound and all of that. Our mental health ally is really just for everybody. And it teaches you all of those questions you just asked. There's like a module on just mental health 101. What is it? SMI, severe mental illness. What does that look like? Substance use and opiates. What is that? How does it work? What are risks? Suicide prevention, right? So there's a competency on what is suicide prevention? What are we looking for? And then actual safety planning. Like, what do you say if you think someone might be suicidal? Because there are very specific things that you should say and not say, but we got to know those things so that you are not, flying blind. A lot of people think by not asking, or if you ask, that you're going to plant the seed, and that's not the case at all. Then we have motivational interviewing, which is teaching you, anybody, how to have these hard conversations. I mean, there's a skill to it. And then diversity in mental health, being aware of the different diversity that affects mental health, everything from that you would think about, ethnicity and gender, but there's also things like geography, right? If you think about it, you might think differently about someone who's rural than someone who's urban. And there's just all of these things. And then we have a module on unconscious bias and one on what to do in crisis. Like, what do you do in a crisis situation? So I say that I go back to the box I sit in, which is education. If you get educated and you learn on what to do, then you can go out and seek the right kind of help, and you'll know those warning signs. We also at Psych Hub have over 200 short animated videos on our YouTube channel on these topics. So they're 2 to 3 minutes. So it can be much more like specific. If you had a specific question, like what does suicide ideation look like in teens, or, we have a video for everything. And so there's a lot of really good free content out there as well to help with all parents and grandparents. And it's important. It's really important that people just get educated and they know what to look for.
Yeah, absolutely. You had mentioned as well on this site about ensuring that e-learning solutions you mentioned about being evidence-based and trauma-informed, but you also talked about it being non-triggering. How does someone know if it's going to be, non-triggering? I mean, a lot of times that's on their personal experience. Is that more about the words or the approach, or how do you have those kind of conversations without them being triggering? Because I can imagine that there's some defensiveness that comes in with some of those conversations.
Yeah, I love that question. That's a really good question because we spend so much time making sure that all of our content is non-triggering. And I think most people wouldn't even think about it. But I mean, we go through I think it's a 20-point check process about everything that we do. So, triggering our words. We also have a communication guide about mental health, like words to use and not to use, to just, again, educate people. But, there are specific things that are triggering and you can avoid them if you know what they are. So we work very hard at that. And then once you educate yourself, then you can start to have these conversations and feel good about being able to offer support to someone during a difficult time. I mean, that's I think the biggest takeaway through this is that there's not enough licensed mental health providers to meet the demand. And so all of us have to really step up and lean in during these times and be support, whether it's to our parents, to our kids, to our siblings, to our friends, to our colleagues. Well, we can all, imagine if everybody was trained and they knew at least how to offer support, not to treat, but just offer that first line support. So it's important to know that there can be triggering words and that, you have to be culturally responsive and you have to be trauma informed. And really people come with a lot of trauma and going to know how to deal with that and how to recognize it. Right.
Well, I think as a former police officer, being on, many scenes, many calls, there's, you could go, you could trigger someone very, very quickly and things can go in a not good direction just based on your words. Right. So knowing what some of those things are and being present and seeing how people react, right, to as you're moving. Are they leaning in and are they responsive or are they kind of backing off and being defensive? So, not only having the tools, but also, having those visual cues, right, about being present with a person that you're talking to and being really open to how they're feeling in the moment as well, because different times of the day could even make a difference in when you have some of these conversations. So that can come into effect. So I wanted to look to is, we talk a lot here on the show about how we consciously create our life, right? And what are some of the tools and outlooks and methodologies that we have? What are some of the ways that you consciously create your life?
Wow. In my personal life, or my professional life?
A little both.
I mean, I guess I'd say I'm lucky in that I get to work in a space that I love and I'm super passionate about. So it's funny. It's like, I'm one of these people that I can't go wide on a subject. Like, I know just a little bit about a lot of things, but I know a lot about mental health. I can go deep in this subject just because I love it. And I've worked in it for so many decades and my whole career. And I read about it and I learn about it and I listen to podcasts and I learn a lot from our team and actually the content that we develop. So I would say that I am very intentional about that, about being deep in an area. And, I like on a personal level, I work hard every day to wake up and exercise. So I work out every day and that's not always easy. I'm a Peloton junkie, but I think that gives me some balance. And if I don't do it in the morning, it's not going to happen. So, I'm big on closing my rings on my watch, on my Apple Watch. But I think that, I guess I'd say that a trait that that I'm very intentional about and think about every day is humility, and just to be very aware of the fact that there are a lot of things that I have as responsibility on me, and that I I'm grateful. We talk about gratitude, but I think it's one thing to say it and another to really work at it. And I work at it every day, and to have the humility that I only know what I know. I don't know everything. And I need to have people around me that know what I don't know. And that's what makes me stronger, and work on my own ego and my, keep my insecurities in check so that I can continue to let other people grow around me. And at the same time, allow myself to step back and be good at what I am and let other people rise up. And it sounds easier, but I have to think about it a lot. So I don't know if that answered your question, but those are kind of top of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And how does positive mindset come into play for you?
Well, I think luckily for me, it's funny. My mom said to me yesterday, she's like, everything with you is always positive. So I think some of it does actually come naturally. I tend to think of the glass half full. Something bad can happen and I'll be like, well, there was a lesson learned in it and there's a silver lining. But, so I do think part of it is just how you're wired, right? How to think about it. But, positive mindset is everything, because if not, you can get stuck into these negative thoughts and they just, they could start ruminating inside you and they just can be so debilitating. Does that mean I'm positive all the time? No. Does that mean that I have times where I get, frustrated and exacerbated? And yes. So, but I think it's just really important that we recognize even in those difficult times, they're just brief periods and it's going to pass, and that better times are going to come. And if you don't experience the bad ones, you can't experience the good ones. You don't know. If you don't know what bad feels like, you're not going to know what good feels like. So I think it's just really important to, stay positive, stay hopeful. I talk and I think a lot about options. Like when you have an option to something, if you think about, you're stuck, you're in a dark place. Every option is a ray of light in that dark place. Some of them could be realistic. Some of them could not be realistic, but those options give you hope that things are coming and they start to guide you on a path. And that's, I think, so much of where you can move to positivity is just be thinking about, how can I handle this way, that way, and these answers are always kind of in the gray, but to just keep moving in that direction, I think is what helps stay positive.
Right. Now, I agree. I think that, it's helpful for people to know that, you're not always going to be in those dark places, right? And that, not only can you get support in places, like Psych Hub, but you can also know that you can choose a better feeling, right? And you can choose to be more positive. And even if it's just like a degree of a little bit more, right? It gives you that set spectrum. And I think so many times that we look at mental health and just life in general is this, it's either good or bad, right? And in looking at it as a spectrum, I always like to look at it as kind of a dimmer switch, right? We can brighten it just a little bit, and that can make the difference in the decisions that we make and what things look like and what that can be. So I think that makes a big difference. In fact, one of the things I love to ask my guests is because I think our environment plays a big role in how we look at life, and we live life differently in our bedroom versus our kitchen or our office. So what's your favorite room in your home and why?
Oh, I love it. I'd say the room I'm in right now, my office, I have a big giant wall that's a whiteboard wall. So you can't see it, but it's to my left and it's got my whole brain dump on it. I like this room. And it's funny because I work remote, but I'm pretty disciplined and I wake up every day. I work out. I make my bed. For no good reason, but I make my bed and then I walk through the kitchen to the office and I'm here for intentional time. So I like it in here because it's a space for work for me to focus. But I will say after being on Zoom calls all day long, I'll grab my laptop and I'll just go sit on my balcony or at my kitchen counter just to get a break from this room of to me, it's the intense workplace, but I would definitely say it's my favorite room in the house.
I love that.
I live in a condo, so in the building.
Oh, perfect. I love that because one of the things that I love that habit, we kind of offhand go, I make my bed every day, right? And a lot of times people don't realize or they've forgotten that is actually one of the number one success habits is to actually make your bed every day. And when we've gotten into a lot more people working remote from home, I think there's some more blurred lines of, do I need to make my bed or do I, work out at a certain time or just those certain routines that happened when we left our home more often. And so when we do some of those habits on a regular basis, it allows us to have some parameters and some reliability and some constancy, right? In a crazy non-constant world. So I love that you mentioned that. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but making your bed is actually one of the number one success things because it's a sense of accomplishment right off in the beginning. Like no matter what else you do in the day, you made your bed.
Yeah. And I think there's a discipline that comes with success too. I said I was a Peloton junkie, and one of my instructors said the other day, and I just loved it. And she said, confidence is the side effect of hustle. And, and I thought about like the hustle, to me, that's like the working hard, not like, you've been hustled, but that working hard comes from like, you wake up and you have this routine, and whatever that routine is, that it's intentional and it creates a discipline so that you then can do what you need to do with work and then take that break and stop working and do what you need to do for play or relaxation or whatever it is. And, it's interesting just learning about when COVID, where people get their energy from. Like I'm very extroverted, so I get my energy from people. And so for me, being home alone is not healthy. Even I'm on Zoom all day, that's good, but I got to get out. And other people, it's like, they get their energy from being alone. So they don't want to, if they've been on Zoom all day, they don't want to go out. They just want to stay home, be quiet, be in their head. So I think, there's no right or wrong, but it's just getting to know yourself is so important. And then knowing what drives you and then putting in that discipline to have that, whatever that is, so that, you're taking care of yourself in the best way you can.
Right. And, especially right now, there is, people are making decisions. Do you go back to work? Do you still working from home? Are you going to have a hybrid of that and what that looks like? And I know that has triggered, a little bit of fear for people in terms of they want to be with people, but then they're sometimes afraid to be with people. So there's a little bit of that happening. What are some of the things that you do to move past fear?
I think it goes back to like what I was saying before about taking risks. I just told to my team this morning in our Monday morning huddle, I'm a big believer and big advocate of taking risks. And I just think that risks is like the only way to combat fear is that you just have to try, and you have to look at it like I'm going to do this and I'm either going to have a success or a failure or somewhere in the spectrum. Right. But it's a numbers game. So eventually you're going to have successes. And the truth is, the more successes you have, the more confidence you have to take more risks. So you've got to start that cycle somewhere. And, the fear really, either it's a negative voice inside your head that's telling you things that may or may not be true. And if it is true, sometimes you need to listen to it, right? You need to be able to evaluate inside your head. Like, is this a appropriate thing to be afraid of? And if it is, and I do this too, and you just make calculated risks. It's like, I'm not going to do this because I know this feeling of fear and it's telling me don't do this, and that's okay. But then you have to know, if you're always feeling fearful, then you're going to have to take a risk and try it. So I think it's a balance, but I think about it a lot. I'm older now, and I've really learned to recognize the feeling, almost like the physical feeling of what that fear feels like. So then I'm able to I'm like, oh wait, I know this feeling. Something's making me nervous or anxious. So what is it? And then, just taking it in head on. And then just, is that rhetoric I'm telling myself true, or is it not? And then, taking risks to try to combat that voice.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Well, one of the things I find helpful for our listeners is to talk a little bit about times that you have felt disempowered and times that you have felt in your power. And I'd love for you to touch on, you did a lot of work for the military, not being a military person, from a civilian perspective. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. There's a lot of times I feel disempowered. I think sometimes the problem with me is I'm like oblivious to it. I just keep going. But yeah, when I first went, I worked in San Diego, where you are at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot. And I didn't know anything about the military at all. I had no idea that boot camp for the Marine Corps west of the Mississippi, everybody west of the Mississippi goes in San Diego. I'd lived in San Diego for probably 15 plus years before I knew that. Flew in and out of the airport, never really realized that was boot camp. And so when I got there, it was very intimidating, just to know how much you don't know. And what happens is, I think especially right now, as we're all being very culturally aware, that one, going back to humility, one has to have this humility to be able to say, I don't understand your culture. Can you please teach me? But I had to do that because I couldn't pretend that I knew. And then you feel insecure because you feel like, everybody kind of knows these things, and they talked acronyms and this and that. And I literally was clueless. So I do think that there's a big element in being, having humility and being able to say, help me understand you better. So I think that would be a time that I felt disempowered. I've had disappointments along the way, and I think like all of us do, it's mostly people more than things, but people disappoint me. And those are so hard when you feel like you have done really right by someone and gone the extra mile and really gone out of your way for them. And then they disappoint you for whatever the reasons why. And for me personally, I'd say those are the things that disempower me the most, because I take it so personally. I think I was recently saying to Patrick Kennedy, my co-founder, I said, I know my weakness. It's when I feel like I've been used or taken advantage of. And that's where I just get like, so that just knocks me out. Whereas like all these other things, I can have disappointments, lost this, and I'm like, I'm okay. But something about, for me, when I feel like someone took advantage of me or used me, in a really harsh way but I know that now. So that I would say is what disempowers me, is just that brings me low. And then I just have to, again, do this self-talk, which I've gotten really good at through some executive coaching, really helping me learn that the stories we tell ourselves are seeds. And if we keep telling ourselves these stories, they grow, and you need to not feed them and rewrite that narrative you're telling yourself. Just because this person or that person, like for me, took advantage, doesn't mean that everybody else takes advantage. And then there's all these great people, and why focusing on that negative?
Right. That's so important to see, and I think that through time, when we see different examples of that and how we can overcome them, and recognizing them is always, the first step to see, what actually triggers you, and that there's actually a good reason, right? Because when you work really hard, you want to, have someone that appreciates it, that people that, really are feeling your impact, and you don't want to feel like you're spinning your wheels and that you're not actually, making the impact that you intend to do. So I totally get that. What about being in your power? Sometimes you've experienced that.
Yeah. I think that for me, and I kind of touched on it earlier, I think for me, being in my power is when I'm feeling my most confident self. And that means that I have the most humility for, I feel the most confident being humble and being able to know I'm good at whatever it is I'm doing, but that there's all these things I'm not. And that I've got all these amazing people around me that plug in those holes. And that makes me feel a lot more in my power, because I can do so much more collectively than by myself. And so I think those are my best moments, where I'm able to, we've had a team that's tripled in size over the past, 4 months or 6 months. So to be able to look at them and say, wow, I alone could do this, with a small team, I could do this with the medium team, but what we can accomplish with all of these people, all kind of set to the same thing, that to me is like the ultimate power, is that, and then you're allowing other people to grow. I love that. I love watching people from all different spaces, places, growing into kind of, who they are.
Yeah. Well, also, when you have a personal vision, you kind of move forward with that. But as a co-founder, how is it that you and Patrick came together? What are your kind of separate strengths that you bring? And what made this partnership flourish into Psych Hub?
Yeah, it's funny because we don't even really know how we met. We always joke about it. We don't really remember like the first moment that we met, but we've been in this space together for decades. And, I think I wrote a book about Inside Battle, our military mental health crisis, and it talked about being proactive in mental health. And Patrick was just starting his sobriety, and he was really advocating for a checkup from the neck up. So we were both kind of campaigning, doing a lot of media around these same topics. So we came together around that. We really, when we started Psych Hub, really came together around how do we move the needle on behavioral health providers and get them acting more as specialists. I mean, it's really insane when you think about how the field is the way it is now, because you're dealing with like people who, as a therapist, like you could see at 9 o'clock an eating disorder, and at 10 o'clock ADHD, and 11 o'clock, bipolar, and then complicated group, and then sexual assault. And there's these different interventions of how to treat it. But we're like, we don't know all of how you're supposed to do all of these things. Plus the interventions, just like, you think about it, a chemotherapy. Imagine if an oncologist, a cancer doctor, treated every patient with the same chemo, right? Regardless if it's breast cancer or prostate and these treatments get better over time, more fine-tuned, more data, more research. So we were just really focused on how do we upskill behavioral health providers to be working in these evidence-based practices, get them to hone their craft, become specialists, and make more precision matching. So people who are seeking care don't have to go to therapy for years and talk and relive things in their past. We now know that doesn't help. So, these specific interventions matter. So I think we just have a very shared common vision. And again, we complement each other. We have very different strengths. But we work really well together. And I mean, I'm super honored. I couldn't imagine a better partner. He's like really just the best advocate for mental health. And he, was the lead sponsor of the Mental Health Parity Act, which is really, it's driving mental health reform right now, that mental health as a law has to be covered by insurance payers at the same as health, your physical health, meaning that if you're not better, they need to keep covering it. So it's been a great journey.
That's great. So what is next for Psych Hub?
Well, I mean, we're moving into some new spaces right now. We have a hub for behavioral health providers. As I was mentioning, we're upskilling them. We have a hub for healthcare clinicians, your doctors and nurses and physician assistants. We have a hub, our mental health ally hub, which is really for everybody about how to become an ally to offer support. Next month, we're releasing mental health ally for HR and people managers for human resource. We're doing that in partnership with SHRM, which is the Society for HR Management. We're doing mental health ally for educators, for teachers, for all the reasons that you brought up about teens and youth. And all of our hubs have shareable resources. They have an ability on our platform to share videos and things and content with people you're supporting. And so I'm excited, our educator, mental health ally for educators, all of the resources are for parents. So that's great. We're doing a mental health ally for teens. We're doing a mental health ally for peers and coaches. So a lot going on in that, in sort of the growth of mental health ally alone. And then a lot more content certification courses in our behavioral health provider hub too, around substance use and eating disorders and trauma-informed care and IDD, intellectual development disorders, and autism and things like that. So there's a lot of need. And we're doing things in other languages right now. So developing a lot of content right now in Spanish. So lots of growth.
Love it. So good. Well, I know that our listeners are going to want to stay in contact with you. How can they do that?
So that would be great. So on Twitter, my handle is Ask for Help. Ask ASKFOR help. I was in early on Twitter. That's how I got that one. So that's a great one on Twitter. Also, our YouTube channel, Psych Hub has had millions and millions of views on our YouTube channel. So we put out content weekly. So if you look at, I think it's Psych Hub or Psych Hub Education. So, I'd say either Twitter or YouTube, or visit our website. Anything I can do to be helpful.
Great. I love that. Well, our theme for this year are people who are being a force for good in the world. How are you being a force for good in the world?
Wow, that's a great theme. I think I'm trying. I'm not going to say I am a force for good. It's a state that I thrive. I want to be. I don't know that I always am. But I would say that, I get to run a company that develops content that can be life-changing for people. And I hear stories and testimonials all the time. And it definitely makes me feel good that we're making a difference in people's lives, because education really can make a difference and teach people on what to do. So I'd say that. I feel like, just what I've been really trying to do also, Diane, is just to be present and be present with people and to listen to people and not judge, and allow them to be who they need to be when they're with me and present with me. And I feel like that's one of the best ways that I can be a force for good right now, is just to, just to be focused. And it's interesting. I feel like I have better friends right now in my life than I've ever had. And I think a lot of that comes from that kind of intentional, very present time. And I think if we could lead with that and everybody could do that, then we really could have a lot of good in the world. But sometimes we're not great listeners, and sometimes we can be judgmental. So that's what I'm working on. I'm always working on something.
I love that. Well, any final thoughts before we wrap up the show?
No, but I'm really grateful I'm super grateful to have that you had me on. And, if I can ever be of any assistance to you or whoever, visit Psych Hub. Like I said, we got tons of content, and we got lots of shareable content too. And just remember that it's okay to not be okay. And that, like we talked about, it'll pass.
I love that. I think that's a good thing to be with, that it's okay to not be okay. And Marjorie, I just want to thank you for all of your wisdom and your insight. You are definitely a force for good, and you're making a big impact in the world and in mental health rights and education for people to have. So thank you for who you are being.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, we know you know someone, whether it's you or someone in your life who needs some support. Please check out, Psych Hub for all the resources that there are out there. Please share this video or this audio, whatever platform that you're listening on, with even just one person who needs to just hear this message today. It may make a difference in how they're feeling, the isolation that we talked about, people having better conversations with their children. This is an important conversation. So please share it, get it out there. If you have any questions or comments, please put that in there. You can tag myself and Marjorie. We're happy to answer any questions, making sure you get the resources that you need. And until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye.